On our panel, we will have Maria Gafo Gomez Zamaloa, I hope I pronounced it right, Head of Social Sustainability Unit from DG Agriculture from the European Commission. We have Nona McLeaf, Head of European External Affairs from Unilever, Maria Pico, Secretary General from the European Councils of Young Farmers, and Gerben van Lugt, Global Director from Grodan. And we will hear the introductory remarks from our panelists. You will start, and after the introductory remarks, of course, the floor is open for questions, also from the audience online. And I have to apologize right from the start that shortly before 11, I have to leave, because in Parliament at the moment, everything is tripled. But I will hand over to Roland-Jan, who will then moderate the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much, and I'm looking very much forward to today's discussion. My office is present and will tell me then about the outcome also. So thank you very much, and I hand over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and thanks also for organizing this event and for inviting us. This week seems to be the Generational Renewal Week in the European Parliament. Yesterday there was a big congress, and then there are a lot of discussions ongoing. And Manuela, you referred to this MFF. This indeed keeps us very busy. And just to highlight that in the core of the CAP proposal for the period after 27, generational renewal is at the core. And I will try to give you some hints why this is the reason. And I would refer also to the vision for agriculture and food that we adopted in the spring of this year, and that sets a little bit the direction for agriculture and food in the medium long term, but also that puts at the core of this vision the dialogue, the need to discuss, because there was a lot of confrontation, a lot of polarization, and we really would like to advance together. I would focus my presentation on this challenge of generational renewal, and I would start putting on the table some numbers that I think will make very clear why we are taking actions on that. I don't know if you are aware about what is the average age of farmers in the European Union. I guess if I ask around, the number would not be very low, but on average, we have 57 years is the average age. In some countries, the average age is above 60 or 61. So we have a big challenge. If we are talking about young woman, we need 30 farmers to have one young woman. And young in agriculture is not 25. We call young farmers 40, below 40. My kids will laugh if they hear that. And so basically we have a challenge. Another number that I would put on the table is this ratio between the farmers above 65 and below 40. Above 65, it means the retirement age, and below 40. So in many countries, many countries, especially in the southern of Europe, but also in the north of Europe, we have more farmers above 65 than below 40. So this means that in 10 years' time, half of the farmers will be really of very high age, and that if we want to secure the food security in Europe, we need to take actions in this context. So we were mandated by our boss, von der Leyen, to carry out this strategy on generational renewal. This is part of the priorities of the Commission for Agriculture. And of course, it wouldn't make any sense if we do it in an office here in Brussels without talking to anybody. So we try to put a lot of attention to the consultation. And I'm looking at Marion Picot from SEJA, because we really had a very good cooperation with the SEJA and the young farmers. I think it was a bit egoistic from our side, because it wouldn't make any sense if we don't put forward measures that are considered to be helpful. We undertook this wide consultation with the young farmers and rural youth, but also we discussed with the countries, with the member states. This is also particularly relevant because many of the challenges, the actions to be put forward, are not under our competence in Brussels, but it is really the national competence. And this shows that we have been doing efforts in the CAP, I don't know, I think it's from the 60s, before I was born, that we were putting forward measures to support generational renewal, and the situation is very different. different. So it means that in some countries, they use well the measures at EU level, and they put also forward measures at the national level that work. So this was really the core of the strategy. After the consultation, we identified 5 priority areas where we see that these are the key challenges that have to be addressed. And I would say that the 5th priority area that I would present, it was not initially in our papers, but it came very, very strongly after. So the first challenge is this access to land, which is very problematic in some countries, and for which we do not have very good information. So for this, we put forward as an action a land observatory. And for this, we got also support from the European Parliament that provided the money to put forward a pilot action. And we believe that this is really necessary, because this is indeed a key challenge, and the prices are sometimes really prohibitive. So it's not possible for young people to go into this path. The second really big challenge is this access to credit and to finance. And for this, we work together with the European Investment Bank to see if they could further support the young farmers. And also in the CAP proposal under the future MFF, we tripled the amount of support through financial instruments to go into this direction. The third element, which I think is very relevant, is access to knowledge and innovation. And for this, we were fishing a little bit outside of the agricultural policy in other EU policies. So we met with our colleagues in other Commission departments, and we put forward one action that, of course, you heard about Erasmus. Erasmus, I think this is the flagship program of the European Union, but there is one, Erasmus, which is specific for young entrepreneurs. And there we want to give further facilities for the young farmers so that they can go to other countries, not to exchange in other farm. This is possible, but maybe a young farmer could go to a marketing company or to a food company, so to enlarge a little bit the views and to get further perspective. So this is, I think, an important action. And then, of course, you would agree with me that a young people and a young farmer would not stay in a rural area if there is not a rural life or good perspective for basic services, etc., if there is no pediatrician, if there are no schools, etc. So the fourth block refers to this quality of life in rural areas. And there we put different actions, but just to name a few. One is in the new CAP proposal, we are putting forward one measure that so far has been very much welcome, which is the farm relief services. So this means that if a farmer has to go on sick leave or on maternity leave or wants to take holidays, there is a possibility to find some replacement. So we could contribute through the CAP for this. And why this is for young farmers? Because I think the young people care very much about this work-life balance. I don't know for you, but when I started working, I didn't care about that. I just got the job. But now the new generations, they really care about this work-life balance and the fact that they can have a good life also outside of the work. And for this, I think this farm relief services is very relevant. Another measure that I would mention is that we want to put forward what we call the network of rural ambassadors. So also contributing to have a good perception about farming and the farming profession. And this, the fifth block, I mentioned that it was not initially in our papers. It refers to the pensions and succession. And this is related to this fact that you have more farmers above 65 than below 40 on average in Europe and in particular in some countries. And this is due that in some countries, farmers do not have good pensions. So they don't have good pensions and they need to rely on the CAP payments and they have to stay in agriculture because if not, they will not have good living. So we want to really push countries so that they put forward measures to support these old farmers so that they can leave the place for the young farmers. This is important not only for the generational renewal also, but also it is related to the future of farming that we want. And we have some studies that show that if you have a farm that doesn't have a successor, after some time, the investments, of course, go down. So the situation of the farm is going into a bad situation. But if there is a farm that has identified a successor, it goes really the other way around. So this is what we are looking for, vibrant farms with innovation, etc. These, I think, are the key elements. I would finalize just referring to the 2 targets that we include in the strategy, which are very ambitious, and I can tell you that this was probably the most difficult of the negotiation. The first is an aspirational target to double the share of the current young farmers, which is 12% in 2040, so to reach 24% when considering also new farmers. And then the other target, which is also, I think it has been very welcome, but young farmers, they believe that it should be really binding. But this is, the strategy is a communication, so this is how far as we could go. And it is to aspirational target for member states to dedicate at least 6% of the agricultural spending for generational renewal. And with this, I have finalized my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 5 very important priorities. I would also add another one. This is not specific only for young farmers, but who could be also of relevance. I know we're not going to discuss it today. I just wanted to throw it into the room. That is, of course, the health of farmers, because this is also something that we're discussing a lot at the moment, that sometimes they use products which are detrimental for their health. But I stop here, and we maybe we do another event just about this, because we would fill the whole day about this. I'm very happy now to hand over to Nona McElvey. I hope I pronounce it right, by the way. McElvey. Okay, sorry, from Unilever, and we are very much looking forward to your thoughts about this.
Unilever for food, and that's why we're here, of course, about agriculture. But we also make cosmetics and detergents, and you'll be surprised, or not, that they also rely on some agriculture. So having, sugar plants for rhamnolipids that go into our detergents, plant-based oils, botanical extracts, and all sorts of things, that would also help throughout our business. So farming is really at the heart of what we do as a company. I'd like to talk to you about regenerative agriculture, which I also think also helps with generational renewal, because some of these non-traditional practices, are more appealing to young farmers. And you tell me, Mario, if that's correct. That's at least what the farmers we work with tell us. So for us, regenerative agriculture is very important. It improves soil health, biodiversity, and the ecosystem function. And we really work by looking at the farmers we work with and understanding what the outcome is of those practices. So things like cover crops. So, 1 year they'll have tomatoes on one side, and then they move tomatoes to the other side. Then they have other legumes that would fix the nitrogen in the soil. And all sorts of crop rotation, reducing tillage, organic fertilizers, and generally all help the soil thrive and support the beneficial organisms. We believe this is also good for the planet, but of course also essential for farming's competitiveness and resilience, because then you stabilize the supply chains, maintain the yields, and also protect the farmers' incomes. What our focus is on really the measurable incomes. So when you look at what's happened, you see the soil has improved. So what we're really doing as a company, we have our regenerative agriculture commitments, and that's aiming for 1 million region ag under 1 million hectares under region ag by 2030. We're hinting towards 550,000 hectares, so that would be half of our food footprint. So we're working throughout Europe and beyond on specific vegetables that are relevant for our products. So like soy, rice, different vegetables, rapeseed, and we have about 23 active projects at the moment. Maybe I'll mention just a few. Peas, we have peas in northern France, as you're mentioning, you're from North France. Tomatoes in southern Spain, rice in Italy, and then pumpkins and parsley throughout France. One story I really love is this story in Badajoz in Spain. We've had a recent visit actually with some members of the European Parliament and some of your colleagues in the Commission. And they really showed us the results of what they've been doing. We work with one of our suppliers called Agraz. Looking at so they have the Cool Farm tool that we provide for them, and then they measure the greenhouse gas emissions after they start implementing some of these regenerative agriculture practices. They look at their greenhouse gas emissions. They have decreased in 1 year by 37%. They see the bees, 173% more bees. They see the organic matter that's improved. But also, actually, what's more important, during the droughts in Spain, that farmer or the specific farmers, they had tomatoes while the neighbors didn't. So that was a very clear example for us that, it's worth investing in this. And also we have different sort of tools between ARC, Farm Intelligence, and Sentinel-2. I don't know, these are kind of random names, but it's all helping intelligence to, where to irrigate properly and then how to help with crop protection and use less. Why young farmers really matter for us as well. We really welcome the strategy to make farming attractive for young people. We are a powerhouse in Europe, but without generational renewal, of course, you lose competitiveness and you lose strategic autonomy. So our project that we help will have young farmers with training, innovation, and then also the blended funding that we work with different banks. We think this can make farming really appealing and also future-proof for young farmers. So in terms of what's next, well, to scale these practices, we can't just be, a few projects here and there, because that's what we do as a company. And indeed, the farmers we work with, they told us we wouldn't do it if it wasn't for you or for the supplier. So we do need that extra help from the government, from the European Commission. Therefore, the common agriculture policy, of course, comes into place. And I'm happy you mentioned it in the beginning. We do think the common agriculture policy will be a defining test to reconcile economic, ecological, and social imperatives. Regenerative agriculture can be one of the concrete, sort of tested and scalable models to achieve this reconciliation. And I know it will be a lot about the member states and what they'll decide where to use those that funding. But I'd love to hear more from the Commission how you think member states can help, because every time we've discussed with the Commission about, can regenerative agriculture be included in the common agriculture policy, the question was, well, it's really about the member states, so talk to them if you want to. So that was one thing. I think that's it from my side. Really, if we want the farming to thrive, we need to make it sustainable and viable for the next generation. For us, it's science-based, it's outcome-driven, and we're committed to making it happen. So yeah, if we want to have healthy soils, and which would mean healthy food at the end of the day, it would also make happy people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nona, for your intervention. And of course, we're grateful as GlobeEU for having Unilever as a member of the B group, and we're grateful for your support and input. So the next speaker is Marion Picot, who is Secretary General of the European Council of Young Farmers. So Nona already mentioned young farmers and the importance of supporting them. Perhaps you can also address one of the points that Manuela made about health of farmers in your comments. So please, Marion, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. We are, of course, very happy that generational renewal is so high on the agenda this week in the European Parliament. As a matter of fact, the Parliament has always been the house that supported the most young farmers. Fun fact, before the strategy in 2023, there was an initiative report on the topic. And if you look at the strategy of the Commission, there are a lot of similarities. So I think from that perspective, the Parliament's work and the young farmers' work has had the effects that we were hoping for. I am very humbled because every day I get to work with a large group of young farmers from all over Europe with very diverse businesses, very diverse sustainability practices, marketing channels, very diverse as well, rural areas and social fabrics. Yet we actually are able to come down to two elements that bring them in common. And that is something that is quite general to youth. We are working with millennials and Gen Z, for those of you who know that language. And in Syria, they're not fighting, actually. They have two expectations in life. Number one, make a meaningful change. Number two, not compromising on their well-being and work-life balance in that process. And I think that urge to create businesses that have that meaningful impact, but also from a social perspective that can be viable and sustainable, is a very large defining factor for those new generations of farmers. Now, I'm not going to repeat what has been said on why generational renewal is so pressing. You have heard the numbers. There are many challenges behind it, whether it is related to the security of supply for some of the companies present in the room, but also food sovereignty in general, the diversity of our agriculture, which is, I remind you, the main strength that we have in Europe. If we have already sectors like wine, livestock, where there is less generational renewal, it means that in the next 10 years, as already mentioned by Maria, lots of farms will close down with no successor, especially in those sectors. And that, of course, will lead to additional issues of where to get the supply, in what conditions, and under which standards. Obviously, the sustainability agenda is very dear to the heart of young farmers. We have lots of young farmers in our groups that are engaged in organic farming, conservation agriculture, agroecology practices. Regenerative agriculture is part of those. I would not essentialize it. That is not how we see it in CIJA, but I do know that it is of importance for some of you here. And of course, the main aspect often forgotten on why generational renewal is so essential is the social fabric of rural areas. Groups of young farmers, like the members of CIJA, at local level, have an essential function of connecting generations. They are often the ones organizing social life, making sure that once in a while you have in the village a large table with people coming around to check in, know how each other is doing, and discuss what can be improved at local level. So I want to highlight that as well, because it's not just about the economic or the environment. It's also about what brings people together, and that is something that is often unseen. For us, this strategy, the genesis is quite long ago, because in 2000 there was a first white paper from the Commission. But if I had to tell you what really makes a revolution of that document, it's the fact for the first time the European Commission puts in a strategic document the land aspect, the succession, the social policies. It has always been a battle with the Council, with the member states, because they have their own models when it comes to land policies, the way they're going to plan it, when it comes to taxation, social pensions. Maria said it rightfully, it's not just about not having good pensions. In some member states, there is no pension for farmers. So those elements are very important in this strategy because we see it as a leverage. What are we going to do with it? We're going to go in every member state with young farmers organizations and claim better social conditions in agriculture. So this is why the document is very important to us. Now, of course, the main axes have been discussed. I don't want to go in details. I'm going to pick a few examples. On the land aspect, why is the land observatory so crucial? Because we have member states where there is no updated cadastre on how the land is organized. There are member states where landowners are getting most of the CAP subsidies because the land managers have to subrent from them, very often in shady contract, unstable. And you end up in a lot of member states with short-term leasing. Why is that having an incidence? Well, you were talking about improving soil health. In general, if you are going to go with very poor land quality and very poor soil, it can go up to 7 or 10 years to improve the quality. But if you have a leasing contract of 5 years, you're not going to invest in that because you know that at any time it can be there can be a break in your contract. And that, of course, will mean that you will have spent time, energy, money into practices that in the long term will not be pursued anymore. And then you start from scratch on another parcel. So for us, Land Observatory will allow us to compare the different state of land legislation across Europe. And that hopefully will also help us work on that soil quality that is so dear to our hearts. On the topic of investment, financial instruments are the favorite instruments. We have currently an installation aid whose ceiling is at 100,000 euros. To triple it is good news, but let's also be honest with ourselves. In most of the member states, current installation aid is 40 to 60,000 euros per beneficiaries. And I can tell you that this is going to be a very low level of grant. That is why lots of young farmers favor guarantee instruments, that they can bring that to the bank. Yesterday, I was sitting with a young farmer from the Netherlands that had a high-breaking record in terms of price per hectare of land because she had to purchase for 230,000 per hectare. This is the problem for us, and it is also because we are in very high competition with other sectors. The mining industry, the construction industries are particularly eager to have land, but it is the same with public authorities in terms of infrastructure development. It is the same with a lot of other projects, whether related to real estate. Sometimes we also have pension funds and investors purchasing grassland because of the carbon potential, making it more difficult for the local young farmer to access that land to pursue grazing. And as we see, the grazing sector is one of those sectors with the lowest rate of generational renewal. So this land aspect has real consequences. So for us, guarantee instruments are very needed. A bit of words as well on the topic of health and mental health. I think it's very important when we're talking about living conditions. I want you to imagine the level of desperation. We are part of a network, young farmers organizations, where we receive a lot of distress messages. It's on the daily at the moment. You might have heard with animal disease outbreaks, such as in France, for example, we have calls in our offices of young farmers who are deeply distressed, and it is our job right now to equip ourselves to face that. But I do believe that is also the job of value chain actors, of other wider community people. Think of the vets, think of bank advisors, public advisors, but also in private companies. That's very important. I want to emphasize that we do need to have better commercial negotiations. What I mean here is that in many cases, this is one of the first stress factor. The fact that you are going to face traders, which are not necessarily directly from the company you're dealing with, that are going to put an immense mental pressure on you, is a big problem. And I really want to attract your attention to that, because it is very unseen, but for us, it's quite fundamental. So those are a few aspects. Now, the issue we have is that in July, we had a proposal from the European Commission, specifically the NRPP and the MFF aspects are problematic, because since 2013, thanks to the work of generations of young farmers, we had a minimum budget, a binding one in the CAP for young farmers. It is currently 3% of national envelopes for direct payments. What is that serving? It gets installation aid to the new entrants. It gets investment support to young farmers to help them with their capital. And specifically, it is also raising the acknowledgement of member states that they need to do something. Now, in the proposals, there's no binding budget. It is simply a recommendation. I want to attract your attention that this is a backtracking of 15 years for us, meaning that young farmers organizations have many ideas on how to make the CAP more sustainable, but we're going to spend the next 3 years trying to defend young farmers' instruments. So this is something, the key message I want you to keep with you, and also to keep with you that national governments are not necessarily pro-young farmers. And this is a situation that makes it a burden for young farmers all across Europe. And it is a situation where we are wasting one very precious leverage. Because if we have that minimum budget, we are able to go to governments to tell them to not only get that installation aid on the table, but also to say, as you were asking, you ask, how can member states help? There's the CAP, but then there's also the fact that they need to establish a national strategy for generational renewal. They can help by making sure they have a land reform. They can help to make sure to not raise the taxation on farm transmission. Those are the type of tools that the minimum budget helps, and right now it has disappeared. So in the next month, we will be focusing on that, on making sure that co-legislators understand that in the absence of a minimum budget for young farmers, all the nice elements I told you earlier, sustainability, soil health, investment, competitiveness, social fabric of rural areas, in 10 years, we don't know where we go with that. So that's what I wanted to tell you today. We have the tools, we have the ideas, delivery remains uncertain, so we need to push for that delivery to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marion, for your comments. I believe that we need to work hard to make sure that young farmers are better protected. And what you already mentioned, the lack of pension in some countries, the absence of fair trading very often, and the competition for land and the absence of long leases is something that needs to be addressed. And perhaps if we have a little bit of time after the introductions, we can go into that in a bit more detail. And then I would like to move to Gerben from Grodan, which is a sub of Rockwool, which is another valued member of the Globe EU B Group. And Gerben is going to talk a little bit about the role of controlled environment agriculture, which Grodan is a big supplier of. So, Gerben, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on this matter on behalf of Grodan. Everyone knows Unilever, not everyone knows Grodan. It's a combination of growing Denmark, and I will basically come back to both topics. The company was established in 1969, is headquartered in the Netherlands, but part of Rockwool, and Rockwool is a Danish company. And Rockwool, by the way, is the world's biggest manufacturer of stone wool. You might know stone wool as an insulation material, but it happens to have ideal properties as a growing media as well, which basically means you can grow plants on stone wool. And plants could be flowers, but most importantly, it's vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, sweet peppers, but also lettuce and strawberries, for example. In that case, the stone wool acts as a block or a slab in which the roots grow into, and that we can use to very precisely dose water and nutrients. So that is what a growing medium actually is. So in Grodan, we supply our products, our stone wool products, but also crop advice. So advice to growers on how to grow on growing media, as well as sensors and a data platform in order to enable the grower to very precisely steer the water and the nutrients in the growing media. We supply to more than 70 countries around the world, typically to high-tech greenhouses, as well as indoor farms. And those two facilities together we call controlled environment agriculture. I say it because I would like to, in this discussion, bring controlled environment agriculture to the forefront. It's called that way because in those facilities you can control not only the climate, so humidity and temperature, but you also control irrigation. In the discussion today, I would like to bring CEA to the forefront. And in that context, you will hear me talk about growers more than farmers. That's because we call our farmers growers. If you think about the future of agriculture, I think we have three key questions to answer in Europe. One is, how do we autonomously feed the population with healthy and nutritious food? Second, how do we do that within planetary boundaries? Super important. And third, how do we ensure that in the future we still have the companies, the people, the skills, the technologies to do this? And controlled environment agriculture could basically provide solution for all three. I will briefly touch on the first two and then dive a little bit deeper into the third one, which is the topic for today. How can we empower future growers with the right skills and technologies? So first, about food security. We believe that CEA can be a strategic asset in Europe's food security. Not the only pillar, obviously, but an important pillar. As growing food in high-tech greenhouses is typically done pretty close to consumers, so it reduces the dependency on long supply chains. It reduces dependency on extreme weather conditions and also geopolitical instability. It enables predictable production with high yield year-round, with less pest pressure and much more efficient use of land, water, and nutrients. So that means supporting CEA in Europe would be basically supporting the food security agenda of Europe. Then to the second part, the planetary boundaries. Important. Europe's food system is under pressure. We talked about it already. Agriculture obviously contributes to water stress, biodiversity loss. There are different ways to deal with that. CEA could be one. And open field farming is becoming more and more vulnerable to heat and water shortage due to climate change. CEA can offer a solution there. since in high-tech greenhouses, we can produce up to 6 times more per unit measure and use less resources. So as an example, we talked about tomatoes. You talked about tomatoes. Let's talk tomatoes. If you use tomatoes in open field, it will take you per kilogram 60 liters of water. And if you do it in a controlled environment agriculture on stone wool, it can go down to 4 liters of water. So that's a very significant less use of water, so to say. But also we have closed systems. So we not only dose the water very precisely, but we also recirculate the water and reuse it. And especially if you use more advanced cultivation technologies without drain, as we call it, actually all the water you use is used by the plant. Talking about water, it's an important topic. Water resilience is an important topic. I understood there is the water resilience strategy by the European Commission. And agriculture obviously is the largest net consumer of water in Europe. And likely to rise, I would say. And we can break the pattern with CEA. So this is where CEA could really help. Like I said, 64, that's a 98% decrease of water usage. So later today, this afternoon, 2:30, we host as Grodan a session on what is called advancing water resilience in agriculture, where we bring policymakers, food and agri industry leaders together to talk about water resilience. And obviously you are more than welcome to join, I would say. If Europe wants to deploy CEA, there are a few things important. First of all, we need support in policy, in investments, in infrastructure, but obviously also in skills. So let's talk about the future growers and generational renewal. I won't use the numbers again. I have them here, 12% of farmers under 40. And CEA, by the way, is not different in that respect, but it can make a difference when it comes to generational renewal because it has the potential, we believe, to attract new talent for 3 reasons. First of all, we change the nature of agricultural work. Indoor environments use data, climate control, automation, robotics, AI, and that appeals to people with a different background, technical background, engineering background, data science background. But also it offers a cleaner, more controlled working environment, which we just heard is important for young farmers. And with a strong focus on sustainability, circularity, and resource efficiency, it also appeals to young farmers who want to make meaningful careers addressing the big challenges of today. But like I said, CEA is not immune to the broader problem. We face the same barriers. We talked about it: land, capital, business succession, very important, margins. And in CEA, we actually add a new challenge, which is that we look for hybrid talent of agronomists and technology managers, and that is in short supply. So we definitely need to make an effort to train people, empower them, and bring them into the industry. So this is what we try to contribute from Grodan. 3 things. First of all, we try to obviously build the capability, lower the threshold for talent to join the industry, and then also accelerate the learning curve by innovation and knowledge development, which basically means we work together with growers, with other industry members like lighting companies or seed companies, research institutes as well, and governments to invest in knowledge development to more sustainable cultivation methods. 2 examples: one, again, tomatoes, low energy cultivation of tomatoes, very important because obviously energy use still is an Achilles heel of CEA. So we need to work on, first of all, making it renewable energy, but also lower the heat demand in the glasshouse. Second, we now developed a cultivation method for strawberries, fully on stone wool, and as we speak, it just was delivering record-breaking yields. Next to that, and it's actually my role in Grodan, we also develop heavily into sensors and data to make the whole growing process even more controlled and keep lowering the resource use and higher the performance of growing on stone wool. All that knowledge we translate into knowledge products. So this is the second part, is knowledge sharing, such as white papers, what we call grow guides. How do you grow on stone wool? Crop-specific irrigation protocols, and we deploy it through, first of all, our data platform. So on the data platform, growers can also find the knowledge on how to grow efficiently. Second, seminars, trainings, and we have a few platforms like the International Propagation Seminar, where we bring global propagators together to exchange knowledge, and the Green Expert platform. Last but not least, we have 20 plus crop consultants around the globe that train young growers on cultivation methods. And we support the Farm Tech Society, which is an international not-for-profit industry association that supports CEA. And we talked about, I think, Erasmus, right? One of the, they offer online free training for people in the agricultural industry to strengthen their skills. One of the programs is Ponics Vet, which is supporting by Erasmus Plus, and as a big success. This is the way we try as Grodan to build that talent pipeline for CEA. So two important things. If we want to make CEA a pillar in a sustainable future food industry, first, let's prioritize regulatory frameworks and incentives that reward that way of growing. Resource efficient, circular, precision growing systems. We need some recognition of CEA in policy as a key contributor to Europe's climate smart food production. And second, and this comes back to the generational renewal part, we need to improve access to capital, infrastructure, land, and facilitate young entrants into the industry, and ensure that the skill development is accessible, affordable, therefore adequately funded, and also it matches with the needs of the indoor growing community. To conclude, CEA is not the silver bullet to generational renewal, but it can help, and it provides agriculture, in my view, with a new story. And that story is a story of high tech, data, sustainability, and that speaks the language of the next generation. And we from Grodan, at least, are firmly committed to empower that generation through capability building, innovation, knowledge development, fostering the ecosystems. And with that, we believe that CEA can become a pillar in the future food system, and that young growers are central to make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gerben. I fully agree with you. I think, the controlled environmental agriculture, if it makes growing produce more resilient to weather conditions, if it shortens the value chain, and if it brings in young farmers who probably can use artificial intelligence more and more to have an even more controlled environment, it would be a very important element. So, having finalized the introductions from our speakers, we have a little bit of time left for questions and answers, but I would first like to give the opportunity to the speakers themselves to ask questions to the other speakers or comment on what the other speakers have said, but really, really very short, because I don't want to risk that we deprive the rest of the audience from being able to ask questions, or nor do I want to eat in the time we have for the second panel discussion. So does any one of the speakers would like to ask anything? I don't see anyone. Are there any questions from around the table to any of the speakers? Yes, if you can introduce yourself, please, and use the microphone.
Thanks a lot. My name is Jorge Conesa from the Fair Trade Advocacy Office. I want to raise a topic that might appear to be out of the scope of this particular strategy, but I hope that by the end of what I want to say is relevant, and hopefully you can react to that. We were discussing before about Africa as the young continent. Indeed, 1/3 of Ghana's population is young. You can guess what is the average age of a cocoa farmer in Ghana? 55 years old. In a country in which the life expectancy is between 55 and 65 years old. So the problems we're facing are actually global. And while this strategy obviously focuses in the EU dimension of it, both are interconnected. Take the example of, let's keep on going with tomatoes. Obviously, if the practices and the living standards of tomato growers out of the EU are ridiculously low and unfair, that's going to have an impact in all EU farmers and in young people in particular who deserve a fair remuneration. So with this, where I want to go is to keep in mind that supply chains are interconnected and that it's important for all the actors in the chain to keep in mind this fair remuneration dimension across the field. Obviously, buyers have a role to play on this, committing to fair remunerations in their practices across the board in all the supply chain. That's something that some buyers are advancing, some others are lagging behind. And when it comes to policymakers, another room of the parliament right now, the Unfair Trading Practices Directive is being discussed. That's an essential part of the toolbox. And we have to make sure that it applies to all farmers in order for fair competition and fair remuneration to happen. And at the end of the day, to promote practices that create an enabling environment across the board for young farmers in the EU and out of the EU. Thanks a lot. Perhaps direct question to the speakers. I would like to know perhaps from Unilever on how do you see this topic of fair remunerations in your supply chain? How are you working on that? And perhaps while this is out of the scope of this particular strategy, I would like to hear your views about this global dimension. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and I'm glad tomatoes are very on topic today. We do have actually, and thanks for the question. We do have an important commitment on livelihoods, and the certain committee, I think it's about 250,000 farmers and SMEs that should be getting a living wage by, and we have certain. I can come back to you on the exact timing, and there. We indeed work a lot more outside of the EU than within the EU. So I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of what's happening out there. It's not easy though, because we work with suppliers as well. So there's certain ecosystem you can have to bring together. But we're trying, and regenerative agriculture is part of that. But the living wage commitment and is also another side of it. So yeah, definitely on top of our agenda. Mm.
Thanks a lot. And wow, it's impressive to hear that in Ghana, the average age of this cocoa farmer is 55. So at least I was very surprised about that. But on the core question that you had on this fair remuneration and fair prices, just to tell you that when we started working on the strategy, we launched it in a youth policy dialogue. So we put together young people and we started talking about what are the key challenges. And I suppose you have participated in this type of meetings where everybody writes posits, and then we have a wall full of posits. And then we ask them from 50 posits to really identify what is the key issue, the core posit. So the posit that was selected at the end is simply fair prices. Fair prices. So no need to get financial instruments or whatever. The young farmers, what they really want is fair prices for the products. This, of course, has connections to many elements, including on these UTP and fair trading practices. So we are working in this direction to try to identify which are the practices that put really the farmers in a weak and in an unfair situation. And I think we are close to an agreement, or I think the agreement is already there. And we believe that it can help. But indeed, finally, if there are fair prices, I think many of the problems are solved. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura. I see one more question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I have a question. My name is...
Introduce us.
Okay. Wilson Kirstein, Vice Coordinator from Valoriza Research Center from Portugal. So I have a question because I just came with the Portuguese delegation 2 days ago from the COP in Belém in Brazil. And the point is that we have been with the authorities from United Nations as well, and also the EU. And I have a question perhaps for the authorities here of the agriculture point of view about, for example, how we can assure this commitment that was being made somehow in the COP with the United Nations and also the EU about the just transition And for this for this point of the young farmers and also the small farmers, let's say, because we are working in this kind of low density territories, for example, in Portugal, in the borderland, in Spain. So what can you ensure, or how can you use some kind of these policies that prevents them to be like forgotten on all of this strategy? Because in fact, is quite a challenge that we deal like daily in our research center and also the companies that we are working on in the Portuguese-Spanish borderland. And in my opinion, it's quite easy perhaps for the bigger farmers or companies, but for the small ones, I think it's quite easy for us to say that's okay. We are quite committed, like I heard in COP like 2 days ago in Brazil, but in the field it's quite different. So I don't know if someone can give me some more clarity about it. So thank you so much.
Anyone? Marion?
First, I want to comment the young farmers in Portugal, AJAP. They're an amazing organization. They're doing great work. And I'm actually a huge fan of what they're doing also on climate, because you know that climate adaptation is a big topic for young farmers. We're actually looking forward to next year's initiative on climate adaptation and resilience. We have started the work on that. I do agree with you that there is a perception in the young farmer community that we have lots of objectives. And then when you go to the bank, they know the objectives, but they also think we're unable to reach them. Everyone in society tells us we're never going to be able to reach whatever objective on environment and climate. And then people blame farmers for being pessimistic about them. That's the first element. Second, I think we should not underestimate that there are tools, but we're not making use of them. We have been using financial instruments for quite some time. I'm working a lot with the European Investment Bank. Last year, there was that 3 billion loan package unlocked. The priorities are environment and climate, gender equality, generational renewal. And when you look in the reality of who gets access to those loan programs, it's always the same banks in the same member states, because the others believe there is no demand. There is a demand. The issue is the perception of risk. And what we need is to change the narrative on this. For example, in the CAP proposal, you have that new provision on transition fund. Very curious to see what young farmers can use it to. They have ideas. So if we manage to unlock that and make it not, because I know the conversations in general on those environmental architecture aspects, everyone is going to come in trying to scope it, make the little elements together, or everyone will want to have their input in it. But I think what we need is to make sure to go back to the idea of business plan. It is written in the provision, young farmers can benefit from transition fund if they make a plan that covers their full farm system. That's what we need to encourage. That's the future for us.
If you have a very short question, then we can still. Okay, that's fine, because I don't want to take too much time away from the second panel, where we will be talking about the financing element. So these issues will come up. But I'd like to introduce Bart van der Wateren, who with Nestlé. The company is in the middle of the value chain, and Nestlé is committed to fostering a fair environment for sustainable practices among manufacturers, retailers, and farmers. You will explore strategies and policy topics, including potential revisions to the Unfair Trading Practices Directive, emphasizing collaboration and support for farmers during transitions. So please bear in mind 5 minutes, but the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you very much. That challenge taken. So basically, I will just talk about 3 points. First of all, we heard in the first panel, regenerative agriculture, new and more sustainable forms of agriculture is not the color of the day. And I think that is really important to say. Secondly, how did we get started? Because that's important. And it will answer a lot of the questions from Marion, actually. And third is, how do we scale? And there I will focus on 2 points, the policy framework, but also the fairness elements that was raised by a number of people in the room already. So first of all, it's not the color of the day, this regenerative agriculture. Why it is? So if you look at the studies, basically they are all very clear. Small farm sizes, big farm sizes, after 3, 5, worst case, I would say 7 years, you come to increased yields, you have less reliance on fossil fuels, on pesticides, on, of course, and meaning you have lower operational costs, meaning you have more profitable farms. So I think it's very important. And overall, and this is where we come to Marion's point, I completely understand there is a lot of pressure on the farmers. Then now even the income support is being taken away. But if you look to the studies, it's also very clear that you have less environmental impact, for sure, but you also strengthen the resilience. So the farmers are much more resilient to shocks that the climate is nowadays provoking, basically. And the volatility as well. Less fossil fuel based means less volatility. Super important. We still have the war. We know what it created, notably at the beginning, and now we are only adapting after a few years, but we are not yet over it. That's the first. How did we get started? We have a business case that we recently finalized in Spain, not with tomato growers this time. I will go to dairy. 110 farmers that are regenerative farmers supplying to our factories there. We had a third party looking into how we are working there. The main thing they are saying, and that's Marion's point, it all starts with predictability for the farmers, and you need to really work a long time with them. You cannot just say in 5 years I'm gone, even in, or sometimes it's annual negotiations that you would have. No, contracts need to go longer. We see that from this group of farmers, these 110, 73% basically were already working for decades with Nestlé. So basically, they felt they could trust the other one, so they felt they could do regenerative agriculture, and they could take the risk because there is somebody else who will help them with the shocks. Super important. Secondly, generational renewal. Of these 110, there are 42 basically who are now in generational renewal, because we help them in the education, we onboard them, they were comfortable with the farm probably of their parents, and they took it up again, and they want to stay in farming. Super important, education. The benefits from the case study, carbon benefits, of course, about close to 20% increase in milk yield, so means income directly. And then again, these profits that are increasing because of less use here, in this case, more than 20% less use of synthetic fertilizers. And then, of course, we give the financial support during the start, and then the premiums along the way, according to their progress. So that is how we got started. But then the start is just not enough, because we want this to be much bigger, also across Europe. So we need policy framework change, and we need fairness. First, policy framework. I think Marion also, sorry, but I refer to you, but you are stealing a lot of the elements, so I can pick up on it. The transition payment, I completely agree. This is a business plan not for 1 year. This is a business plan for at least 7 years. So this is a strong element that the European Commission has proposed. We need to keep it at all costs, because that's super important. That will help all types of farmers, including the young ones for sure. Then what we are also missing, we are not speaking with the dairy farmers. It's actually easy. We have a one-to-one relation. We take all the dairy. So if Nestlé agrees with the farmers, these are the conditions, these are the things, it's easy. But if you are a farmer, for example, in cereals, in vegetables, you do not only supply to Nestlé, you supply to maybe Unilever, tomatoes to Unilever, or cereals to another one, or to Polik, for sure, say, in the cereal case. So you need to speak with the same language there, because what Unilever asks, what Polyg asks, what Nestle asks, needs to be the same. And by the way, even better, if the governments would also give CAP funding based on exactly the same language. So again, a point that young farmers brought up a good year ago is this benchmarking tool or sustainability compass. We like the idea a lot because all can be anchored around that. You can have also the banks there that are looking into the same criteria that give them lower loans. You can have the insurers that lower the premium as well that you have to pay. So I think it's all about this framework that should be linked to the same criteria. And we have an organization that is more than 20 years in business. It's called SAI, Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, where they really work. And I think the colleague from Rabobank might refer to it, because you are using it in part already, is really, there is a framework there, Regenerating Together, that can serve as a basis. And I will finish with the fair market. I think fairness is the basis of a resilient food system. If there is no certainty on the returns, there will be no investment on the future. That's very important. Then, this means also investment in sustainability. Then if you look at the situation in Europe, and some of you raised it already, the colleague from Fair Trade Office mentioned for maybe outside of Europe, but the same is in Europe, it's even more. We are confronted in Europe, honestly speaking, with 60% of the food market, of the sales in retail, are dominated by 5 retail alliances that are acting across Europe. All these retailers from here and there, they are grouped within those 5. They are dominating ultimately the market. It's a race to the bottom because, by the way, they are not doing well, the retailers. So it's a race to the bottom. They are squeezing everybody. There is unfair trading practices. There is delisting. It's basically squeezing everyone from big to small. And the first one who is the victim is the farmer, obviously. So we need to be super clear that we are in a very difficult situation in the food supply chain. And yes, we can do a lot on the CAP and transition fund, speaking with the same language, but fairness is the first thing that needs to be addressed, including this system that European competition authorities have been putting in place 30 years ago, where maybe it was good at that point to help a little bit consolidation in the retail sector. But now the context is completely different and we need to change that. And I end with that. If we want resilience of farmers, of food manufacturers, if we want a future, if we want investment, if we want to benefit the society, we will have to address that also first and foremost.
Thank you very much, Bart. There's a lot of pressure on farmers, especially young farmers, as was already indicated by a number of speakers, and there are ways to deal with that, as you already mentioned, to make sure that the farmers become more resilient and become more sustainable, using less resources. And I think we've heard that the tools are there, and hopefully the Commission can help us understand what can be done to make sure that those tools become more available to young farmers, so that we continue to be able to grow and feed a growing European population. So thanks very much for that. But I would like then to give the floor to Casper Hol from Rabobank, who will discuss the critical challenge of sustainable farming's earning potential and the need for both public and private incentives. And he will also share insights on initiatives like the Netherlands' True Value System and call for greater transparency in food chain margins. So Casper, the floor is yours.
That's a lot in 5 minutes, by the way. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. I represent the Rabobank, which I hope you all know. If you don't, it's a big food and agri bank in the Netherlands. My focus is on the Netherlands, by the way, on the transition of the food system. But you cannot talk about the Netherlands without talking about the EU. So I'm quite often also here in Brussels. In the Netherlands, we have a market share of about 80%, 75, 80% of the farmers, but also of the parties further up in the food chain. So also from retail to food manufacturing to food services. So we are by far the leading food and agri bank, which if you look at the glass half full, makes us a part of all the solutions, but it also means that we have been part of the problem. Which is, by the way, the reason why I chose to go work for the Rabobank only 2-3 years ago, having worked for the government for the rest of my life. Because the Rabobank has publicly recognized if you are the biggest financial player in a system which is approaching the brink, then you have a responsibility and a role to play. Which is the reason why I like to speak about transition. So the Rabobank is focusing sustainability on 2 transitions, the energy transition and the food system transition. Of course, I will talk about the latter, but it's good to look at the energy transition because what we see there is an alignment of economic incentives in the market, which is very helpful. And a good example is on the crossroads between the two, which is the controlled environment agriculture, greenhouse agriculture, where you see that the main element of the food transition is an energy transition and where you see that things are going quite well. Why? Because all the entrepreneurs in greenhouse in the Netherlands realize that they are economically better off in the long run if they are not reliant on fossil fuels, if they're not reliant on third parties, if they can more rely on renewable energy and use less energy. So there's a clear economic incentive to do that, which means that they are well on their way to reach their Paris goals, and they don't need strong government interventions. They have their own CO2 system. They will move to ETS, but it's not gonna. It's there. So it would be great if that would work for a dairy farmer close to a Nature 2000 area, but it doesn't. And that's one of the core problems is there is no automatic earning potential for sustainable practices for different sectors in the economy, which we as a bank notice because if as a banker you talk to somebody who wants financing, you know we need to make sure that they earn money back, otherwise they cannot pay us back. That's not always nice, but that's the role we have to play as a bank. So there's a lack of earning potential sometimes, and I know that in the long run there's a lot of models where it can work, but we need to address the elements that make this work, and that means that there are public and private payments, that there's a marketplace for sustainable products, which ensures that the farmer, but also the other parties in the food chain receive a remuneration which is in accordance with what they deliver. And here I would like to focus on what we mean by that, because it is quite popular to look at footprint. So what are the true costs of an agricultural product? What are the harmful external effects of this food production on society, which I think is an important element. But there's not enough attention, and Marion already mentioned it, to the invisible benefits of food production. So what does sustainable food production bring to society? And we call that true value. So there, of course, are environmental gains if you have a sustainable food productions in terms of water quality, soil quality, air quality, biodiversity, nature, etc. But there are also elements in terms of health, diets. There's elements landscape. There is social fabric, as Marion mentioned. There are many sort of positive aspects to the society that are not taken into account if you look at the pricing and the market mechanisms. Already solved, or not solved, but at least addressed by the second pillar of the CAP. Of course, you can do ecosystem payments. For us, that's only the beginning. So what we are looking for is true value models that actually encompass the broader welfare aspects of a sustainable food system, which also allows, for example, taking into account food autonomy, resilience, all kinds of other aspects that are positive for society, but the farmer receives no payment for it. How can we address those issues? And we are convinced that there is a combination of public and private valuation, which includes payments, but it's not limited to payments, because it doesn't always have to be euros. It can be long-term contracts, it can be permits, it can be all kinds of things. So there's a combination of public and private valuation of these of sustainable agriculture production that we need to integrate into the traditionally more economic marketplace. So how do we want to do that? We start with a universal language. Bart already mentioned it. It's absolutely vital that we all agree on what is sustainable dairy production and what is healthy soil and what is an acceptable CO2 footprint for a cow. And we need to not only have similar ideas about this, but the same KPIs, the same measurements, the same data exchange. So, so first of all, a true value language. What are the elements that we want to measure against? If you have that, and we've started this, we've initiated this in the Netherlands together with the farmers, with retail, with food producers, and with the government. So the Ministry of Agriculture is there, and they want to integrate their own KPI system into that system, where we are starting to move towards one system of how you measure sustainability. Based on that, companies and the food chain can create payment schemes or can create valuation schemes on sustainability. At the same time as the government can base both sort of legislation in terms of goal-oriented policy, but also subsidies in terms of what are the more public elements that you want to finance on the same basically on the same data. So on EU level, of course, the benchmarking is the first element in this, which mirrors very closely the movements towards similar key performance indicators. What are the most important things you want to measure? And then you need to think about what kind of earning potential, earning models can be created that are acceptable for the market. Because in the end, this is not a problem for farmers and governments. This is a problem for the entire food chain, which includes the consumer, but it's not limited also to the consumer who has to pay more. We are convinced that throughout the food chain, and we've seen examples already on the table with Unilever and Nestle, there are big parties who have exactly the same goals and the same involvement in this transition. So we are convinced that if you combine that, if you work together, we can come up with earning models which actually translate some of this societal value of sustainable food production into real value for the farmer. I'm already too long, so I'll have to stop here, but there's lots to be said about it. But anyway, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Casper. I think we'll have an opportunity also after we have heard our next two speakers about how we can make sure that farmers get remuneration for the true value that they deliver to society in terms of resilience and food security. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Chuck de Liedekerk, who is the CEO and co-founder of Soil Capital. And Chuck will argue that productivity and sustainability go hand in hand. He will highlight how regenerative agriculture will boost food sovereignty and competitiveness, and we'll discuss the importance of public-private co-financing to maintain momentum in the transition towards sustainable practices. So that within 5 minutes, good luck to you. Chuck,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
So I'll try not to speak too fast then. Indeed, there is no trade-off between what we would call regenerative agriculture, but there are other definitions on this and productivity and profitability. A lot of people talk about how do you finance the transition, and it's clear that there is an element of risk, and there's a way to do this that can cost money. But if one of the questions that Soil Capital is interested in tackling is what are the strategies that reduce both the risks and the costs at every moment of a transition, and that maximize productivity and profitability for the farmer during the transition. Even in the early years of the transition, there's a right way and a wrong way to do a transition, and if we want farmers to do this at scale, it needs to make sense on the economic side as early as possible. So this is part of what we do with Soil Capital. We help farmers with some agronomic and strategic support in their transition, but we also ensure that they receive some form of financial incentive to catalyze that transition, and that is a very powerful tool because, as many of the speakers before me have said, there's a money problem with farmers, and so farmers being entrepreneurs, they will work to the brief that is given to them or to the incentive that is given to them. In this case, what we've seen with Soil Capital is that we have brought in 500,000 hectares in Europe and in the UK with farmers that have, for the past 5 years, reduced and removed over 600,000 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, delivered benefits on water use, water quality, on biodiversity. I won't go into the details for the purposes of time. But I also have another hat as a president of the Climate Agriculture Alliance, where a lot of project developers across Europe are working with farmers. And if you collectively look at what farmers are doing now, or how many farmers are working with the members of this alliance, it's more than 10 million hectares today at different stages of the transition, granted. But in the coming years, what you're going to see is the expectations for these farmers to get paid for millions of tons of carbons, or tens of millions of tons of carbon, tens of millions, or huge amounts of environmental benefits and value to society, as Casper has said. And I'm not sure today that the mechanisms are set up for these payments and these values to be flown to farmers at scale. And to this point, I want to talk 2 minutes or 20 seconds about one of the best farmers that we have in our program, saying, look, if we can't capture the non-crop value of what we are delivering, even though I'm one of the best farmers in my region, even though I'm as regenerative as possible, I don't want to be in this business in the next 5 years. And I think that's really important, because even if we're looking at regenerative agriculture in a context where budgets to farmers are decreasing, regenerative agriculture is a necessary part of the solution, but it is not sufficient. And in this context, what we're seeing is not only all of these farmers showing up now, but we're also seeing a number of pioneering companies stepping up and doing their part to flow money to farmers. And many of them are in the room today. What we are hearing from these businesses as well is, we can't do all of this alone. We can't scale this on our own. And I think that's important, because not only are they a handful in the wider context of the private sector, but in the context of our objectives on food sovereignty, competitiveness of our food sector, and generational renewal, we have an alignment of objectives between the private and the public sector. And I think a lot of the value that finds itself, or that could find itself with farmers, exists in budgets at member state level, possibly at EU level. And if this idea of a universal language can help catalyze the transition, because everyone is getting a benefit out of this, then surely we can do good work. The example we've been paying attention to recently is under the Biden administration. The USDA had earmarked $3 billion in public money for regenerative projects in match funding. And the bids that came in from the private sector to capture that match funding and to improve the economies of scale for the investments that they were making amounted to 20 billion euros. So there are co-financing mechanisms that work. There are farmers that have shown up. There are private sector initiatives that exist today and that require the co-financing mechanisms that will enable scale with a wider participation of the private sector. It will never be cheaper than to help the farmers that have shown up today to scale and to build momentum. Restarting this will be costlier and will compound the delays that we face in the environmental transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for making the case that transition needs to make sense economically, but also from a sustainability perspective. And as Marge already said, if we want to invest in the future, we cannot do that if there is no certainty on returns today. So it goes hand in hand. But I'd like to give the floor to our last speaker, who is joining us from Sicily. I hope I got it right this time. So Simon Kramer from the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture will discuss harmonizing private and public incentives to foster innovation and autonomy at the farm level and address challenges like unfair trading practices and the need for economic resilience. And we'll give examples of Nestle and Waitrose that have invested in this. So Simon, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the wonderful contributions so far. I wanted to start by saying, so as ERA, we're a new farmer association, and we like to say regenerating forms of agricultures, because as Marion said, there is farmers leading the way in conservation agriculture and agroecology and organic agriculture in many forms. And we are just trying to be unity in diversity and just helping to be a stronger farmer movement in Europe and beyond. And there was just a new study also by nice guys from Wageningen, a social science study on where regenerating agriculture stem for, so the term, and it's at the base a farmer movement, and then has been taken up by those also big companies now in the room pushing it. And I'll come back to that. I want also to contribute a little bit to or what we as ERA try to do is change the narrative a little bit, because I totally agree in the sense that farmers are victims of the system. I mean, if we go back to Europeans when the enclosures of the commons started, mainly everyone had a share in land. Now we are way under 1%. However, I think to attract young people and talent to the sector, we need to change the narrative in farmers being climate, health, and safety heroes of our future. And actually in Europe, we always had big farmer revolutions and movements underpinning the regenerations of our societies and economies. So when we think of the Industrial Revolution, we think of the steam engine, but really we had the yeoman revolution of farmers in Britain, doubling their yields during the Little Ice Age, so during much more difficult climate circumstances. And today we have just published a study in the beginning of this year where we see that the pioneers of our farmers, young, old, big farms, small farms from different agricultural philosophies, they are producing what we in our discourses just 2-3 years in the Green Deal believed as empirically feasible, impossible in 2040. So we were discussing 20% reduction of synthetic fertilizers, 50% reduction of pesticides. Oof, we would use our yields and our capacity to feed ourselves. We have now proven that the farmers are already in the last 3 years able to produce the same yields, our pioneering farmers, with 60% less synthetic nitrogen and about 71% less pesticides, using only feed from Europe. So with complete strategic autonomy, a part of the fossil fuels and so forth still in. The other heroism I want to bring in is also water. So we discussed water efficiency, but just as in climate, there is of course the balance of green water, which we're just also scientifically learning about, and regenerating water cycles. So our landscape's productivity capacity for water. We are now learning that 60% of the rain that falls on land is actually produced by plants sweating, so to say, and not only the oceans evaporize. And we believe in the transitions that we need planning security, most of all for farmers. We need no prescriptions for the farmers. So as Marion said, the farmers are the best experts of their context to make their transition plans, and they need their agencies and their appreciation as entrepreneurs fostered and then supported. And Touching on the benchmarking, I also think it's a good development. However, we have to be really aware also of the possible pitfalls. So we are a little bit at the moment where the organic movement was in the late 80s, 90s. We had a lot of private certification schemes and then a consolidation. However, this time it's much different because when we had the organic movement, there was no big industry, no retailers, no multinationals interested much in that movement. So today it's different. Will be publishing in our Regenerating Europe Week in Brussels in the beginning of the year an analysis from the farmer's perspective on over 33 different certification methodologies, and we're also talking with SAI, and we are really working on driving this harmonization. However, with the main caveat that is that the data is owned by the farmers, so that we create true data sovereignty for the farmers, and the farmers basically get a data wallet in which they, without any efforts, can say, I share this data for this scientific project, for this regulation, for this subsidies, or for this supply chain program on their own terms. And that then data sovereignty and ownership brings me to the fair market stuff. And I'm a German. I now live and farm in Sicily, but I'm originally German. And in Germany, we already have an oligopoly in food retail. That's assessed by a very conservative neoclassical economist. And we look a lot to two parts in the system that are mostly concentrated. That's the retail and that's processing and commodity trading. And as you said, they exert pressure all over the chain. However, we also have something like inner erosion. For those in agriculture, we have a lot to talk about inner erosion, but we also have that in the food system. So the less diversity there is along at each step of the chain, the worse the trading circumstances, negotiating power for each farmer. And just in Germany, since COVID, we had 4,000 food industry companies. Now we are at 2,000, and they are all got either vertically or horizontally integrated. And I want to we talk about fair market. I think we have to emancipate ourselves a little bit. So we have to talk about antitrust law. I want to make another historical reference. The US, the last time they did it, is a Pac-Man Act in the 1933 by Roosevelt. They then split up the then largest retailer, which had back then less than half of the market size that Walmart has today. And actually, us Europeans, the Germans, we have quite good retailers. We are more consolidated now. The last number I want to bring is you said we did a research. We'll publish it together with the benchmarking report, but we have so far still token finance going to that regeneration and the emancipation and the enablement of the farmers. So of all, we analyzed 12 big multinationals talking about regenerating forms of agriculture or regenerative agriculture. And so, for example, Nestle, you say you are, correct me if I'm wrong, the bigger headache is 1 billion over 5 years, I think you're investing in regenerative agriculture. So we did that also with McCain, with Unilever, the other pioneers of the conventional big player agri-food system. And it's about, on average, 0.5% of the annual revenue that we are investing in that. And there we have not yet analyzed, of course, what part of that budget goes to the farmer or goes into talking about regen ag. However, that might sound like token finance, 0.5%. I want to say at the same point, it's not so little, because I want to stress again, they are at least starting. Our retailers are not starting. Our processors are not starting. We have calculated on our analysis of the study of the pioneers basically achieving Green Deal targets, if we would put 0.5% of Europe's agri-food system into investing to the farmers at the farm gate, we could enable most, if not all, farmers to achieve these innovation leaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. And that concludes the contributions. And I'm very pleased that we have about 50 minutes for discussion. We've heard that there are tremendous pressures on farmers today. They have to deal with long-term planning. Bart mentioned 7 years business plans at the least. Which makes it probably difficult to move into a different type of agriculture, like regenerative agriculture or a controlled environmental agriculture, because you need investments and with returns not always being clear, that that would need to be supported by private or public funding. There's also, of course, I haven't heard anyone speak about that, but there are also, of course, changing food patterns. People start eating different things. There are changes, less meat, more dairy products, perhaps. So this all adds to the pressure on farmers. Now, let's see if there was a question. I think you had a question, if that's still relevant. Would you like to ask it now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Roland. So first of all, my name is Katrin Heeren from Fooding Europe. So lots of our members are here. I'm very pleased. And it relates actually to what Bart already explained earlier, but maybe just to also stress the need for an integrated supply chain approach when we talk about unfair trading practices, fair prices for farmers, the need to make sustainability investments, like we also heard from Simon on regenerative agriculture. So big problem, the elephant in the room, quite often the retailers and the consolidation, as Bart pointed out. So how to make sure that also from the Commission, getting the right incentives, getting these invisible costs that Chuck and Caspar, you both mentioned, like the invisible benefits, rewarded in a way that it also translates across the whole supply chain without having exploding food prices for consumers. This is, I think, the puzzle we all need to solve together with an integrated supply chain approach, together with the retailers in some way, to come to real solutions that work for upscaling these practices that we were just talking about.
If I can build on that, I think what is super important is, and what is not yet, I would say, completely accepted within DG Agriculture, because we heard from the UTP trilogues as well there, that we are not looking at retail alliances or the impact on the manufacturers, and we don't consider that one as directly impacting the farmers. As long as we will not be accepting that there is an impact, we will not solve it. We will just be around the table and we will say exactly the same again in 5 years, and we will have a new revision of the unfair trading practice and a new one. So we need to fundamentally look at what happens there completely at the end and what is the impact there completely at the beginning. But this link is not yet made, or there is like people who just look, okay, we are responsible for the farmers. Yes, but be responsible for the farmers by looking at what's happening end to end in the whole system. And I think this is important. And I don't want to offend anybody because you are not in charge of this one, but I think this is fundamentally the issue, and also why ultimately the outcome of the trialogue was not what it should have been, because it's very clear. Why are the retail alliances all of a sudden based in Switzerland and not in European Union? Well,
Maria, would you like to comment or?
No, it is okay. I'm not responsible myself from about this UTP, but just to tell you that when we discuss with the farmers, they really support this because they feel it is needed. So hopefully in 10 years times it will not be needed anymore. But unfortunately now it is a legislation which is appreciated and very much welcome. So that's all I can say, and I'm not responsible for that. I just hear the views of farmers. Thanks.
Marion.
Well, I think because I am following the UTP procedure, yes, there is a lot to be done in that revision, but I want to say it goes beyond that directive and that scope. When you see the practices of certain retail actors buying land, this is a problem. When you see the practices of feed management company buying entire pig farms, this is a problem. So I think it is, of course, a very important piece of legislation. And I think what has been done on the cross-border aspect is already a first step. But to us, the most important is next year's revision. Are we able to ensure anonymity of complainants? Are we sure that as farmers, we have the tools to actually protest against those conditions? So far, there's a lot of pressure happening. And I want to link that to another aspect that I think every actor in this room is concerned about is the democratic crisis we are in. Because we're talking a lot about long-term investments, whether it is in the sustainable transition, in farm transmission, generational renewal, and so on. But if I compare, for example, what happened in the past few legislative processes, when you would have a soil monitoring law that is obstructed last minute, when this law is supposed to give us the data to get to know our soils and continue our fight in favor of soil health. This is the type of practices that I feel the entire value chain is now victim of. And I would like sometimes to see a bit more proactivity from other operators of the value chain when it comes to those things. Because when it comes to the soil monitoring law, we were quite alone.
No, with us, alone with us, maybe.
Publicly.
Very publicly, we
Okay.
went till the last mile. Yeah.
Okay, because what I've seen is a lot of enterprises coming in and basically telling us that they are against the soil monitoring law. So there are indeed a few that might be proactively working to make sure that there are better legislative conditions, but we still have a vast majority of operators surrounding agriculture that are frontally going against that type of legislation that gives us better information for our production. And I think that is a problem, and there's a lot of work to convince also within our own house.
I completely agree with you, Marion. This was fundamental to have at least the data, because we couldn't even get further than the data. We should have even been able to do more than the data, but the data were fundamental. We got that. I think now, okay, they still need to be produced, but we have them. But it's true, we will have to overcome even more and have to have coalitions with broader parts of the whole supply chain to go beyond the data then and to act on the data, because that's what regenerative agriculture and other forms of more sustainable agriculture is all about. It's looking to the soil and working from the soil.
Any further questions, comments? Yes.
On the topic of observation, I just wanted to welcome the fact that Casper has brought up the dimension of true cost and make the link with the Agri-Food Cost Observatory that DG Agri has created. I think that it's a good expert group, it's useful, but so far in the discussions of that expert group, this dimension of true value has been absent. And I think that there's an interesting link to be made there and to look more to true value, true cost. In particular, if, and I know this is a big if buying below the cost of production is going to be tackled in the next UTP directive or through other means, it's going to be important to consider true cost in order for that measures to actually be effective.
Casper, do you want to?
No, just to agree. I think it's not a matter of only having a nicer way of presenting if you move from true cost to true value, but I think it helps to prepare our minds and the system for actually earning money with providing something that both commercially and societally is profitable in the end. So for that reason, we prefer the term true value, even though much of the technique underlying is actually true cost technique. So it is not to say we should not think about true cost accounting at all. I think it's absolutely vital to do that. But the context in which we present it is one of true value, so that we can actually use it to evaluate and in the end also remunerate and pay for services and products. That's so I fully agree.
Thank you very much. looking around, I'd like to give the speakers an opportunity to conclude if they want to add to what they have already said or to comment on what has been said by the other speakers. If there is any interest. Yes, Nona.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the unfair trading practices, and I was glad to hear it from also. I didn't know you were the person dealing with it. Great pleasure. Maybe in what you're mentioning about a true cost, and there are already some laws at national level, I think in France and in Spain, where they're looking, the level of protection is a bit higher there, and they're looking, I think, at true cost, or there's a way they're defining that. So I think it's worth a certain discussion. Q3 next year is the revision of the UTP directive, which I think it will be important to look at and see kind of how we work together to get those protections in place. So be happy to have a chat later on. That's it, I think, on my side. I didn't want to comment on anything else.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions before I close the meeting? No. Then I'd like to thank our panelists for having come to the European Parliament to speak and enlighten us with their points of view, their assessments. I'd like to thank everyone else who came here to join us and our participants online. And I hope to see you at one of the next Globe EU events. So thank you very much again, and I'll see you again soon.